we'll move to the technology agency portion of the agenda.
Very good. I'd like to also announce that there are new agendas outside. Secretary Ramos. Carlos Ramos is Secretary of the California Technology Agency. Secretary Ramos was appointed by Governor Brown in June of 2011. He served as Director of the Office of Systems Integration and Health and Human Services Agency and has been involved in many of the largest enterprise IT initiatives that the state is undertaking. He is one of the architects of the consolidation of the state's largest data centers and the creation of California's Department of Technology Services. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Welcome, Mr. Ramos.
Thank you.
Back, I should say, Mr. Ramos.
Yes, thank you. It's nice to be back.
I did notice that your colleagues, or proposed colleagues who testified earlier here for us, I think they've got about 3 or 4 new IT projects.
I noticed that. I noticed they were putting their plugs in early.
Yeah, that was curious.
Thank you for inviting me to be back here with you all. I did provide a written testimony, and I actually read your instruction sheets, which said don't read it here, so I'm not going to do that. I will just summarize, maybe just tell a little bit, because I didn't get to meet all of the board members last time, about what my agency does, and then talk about the advantages or disadvantages of the reorg proposal. The technology agency essentially has 2 functions in state government. On the one hand, we're a service provider where we actually provide technology services to other public sector entities. In some cases, most cases, state agencies, but we actually also serve the federal government and different local agencies as well. So some of the services we provide essentially are data center services, computing services. We also run the state's public safety radio communications services for public safety organizations up and down the state, local government as well. And then we run the state's 911 network for all the dispatch centers in state. So that's one side of the house, the services and technology services provider side. We have a bunch of customers, all public sector entities on that side. The other side of the house is we're a control agency. And what that means is we provide oversight and policy making for the state's technology portfolio. So what we do there, for example, is anytime somebody has an initiative, a technology initiative that they want to launch, they have to go through us and get approved for it. We provide oversight, we establish policy, we review procurement plans, and then we actually embed people or provide folks to go out and watch how these technology initiatives are progressing to make sure that they're on track and that they don't go off the rails. In a nutshell, I guess you'd call us the state's and maybe the taxpayers' watchdog on technology initiatives. So in a nutshell, that's what we do. What the reorg proposal would do for our agency is to move us intact into the government operations agency. I heard Mr. Kay, indicate that, well, maybe there's a little bit of controversy around the movement of my agency into the government operations agency. And I guess that's what I'd like to talk about a little bit. As I see it, there are significant advantages in having us co-located and working in a more collaborative and tighter alignment with the other agencies that would be part of government operations. And the controversy that I've heard, and the criticism that I've heard of moving us, is that folks potentially see it as a downgrade of our agency because the leader of the technology agency would no longer be a secretary, would rather be a department director. And I guess what I would point out, a couple of things. The questions that have come to me is, okay, how do you hold another cabinet secretary accountable for a technology project if you're not a cabinet secretary? Or how do you hold the whole rest of the state accountable if you're not a cabinet secretary or a cabinet member? And I guess what I would say is the authority to hold folks accountable, the authority to have an impact on the technology portfolio of the state isn't related to a title. What it's related to is what authority you have, what actions do you have, how do you engage with the different technology initiatives of the state. So what I would say is the reorg proposal maintains all of our statutory authority that we have today. We have all the authority to step in. We have all the authority to review technology initiatives and projects. We have to, all FSRs, special project reports, procurement plans related to technology still have to go through our agency, still have to be approved. The staff that I have that disseminate policy around technology would still retain that authority and would still retain those functions and those missions. And from the perspective of engaging proactively with the projects, either in providing oversight to going on the floor or in the field to make sure that they're following best practices, to bringing together other agencies that have already gone through similar initiatives and saying, we've learned some very important lessons in terms of what they've done over here. Let's bring them to these new agencies that are just starting on a project. We would still do all of that. So really, as I look at it, there really isn't any disadvantage to having us being no longer an agency and rather a department. In fact, I think, to Mr. Kay's point again, I think moving us into the operations agency is a recognition of the fact that technology, first of all, is part and parcel of the way government does business nowadays. Every single agency in the state relies on technology in order to be able to do its job and to serve its constituents. I think the other recognition is that technology, and when you have a technology initiative, it's not just the technology that's a critical success factor. Having a skilled and capable IT workforce, the human resources are a large part of that. So having us in the same agency that with departments that deal with human resources, that establish classifications, maybe lay out training plans for these folks is very important, and it's a good advantage. The other part that's a really critical component is the area of procurement. Technology procurements can be very complex, very tricky, and oftentimes produce not great results. So having us in the same agency with the Department of General Services who controls procurements and actually executes procurements also offers a significant advantage. And finally, the contracts that folks have to manage projects under also come through the Department of General Services. So having the technology policy, procurement policy, and the procurement execution all within the same agency, I think offers a great advantage. As I said, I don't really see much in the way of risk. Essentially what it constitutes is a title change for the person at the top, at least from secretary to department director. Still retains the authority and responsibilities and the title of State Chief Information Officer. So with that, I think I'll close and answer any questions you may have.
Questions from the commission on this particular subject? I'll ask a couple of them.
Okay.
Part of it, I think, if you look at some of the testimony we got, there certainly is a perception that this is a downgrading of the status of the agency. It appears, from some of the outside testimony we got. And I think, as you know, I think the commission takes particular pride in the establishment of the agency that you represent with the current status that it has. Since we were maybe the first one to make that recommendation, so maybe even to me it seems a little like a step backwards. So you obviously don't agree with that perception.
Well, I think it is just that. I think it's a perception. As I said, in terms of the job, I've been in government in the technology arena for about 15 years now, both as a departmental CIO, running projects, as Stuart pointed out, running a data center, and now as a state CIO. And really what I've come to realize is the impact that you have as a state CIO has more to do with what authority you have and where and at what points can you actually influence a technology initiative. And that really doesn't pertain to the title. It has more to do with do you review and have to approve proposals? Do you get to review procurement documents? Are you able to, if you need to, go in and intercede if a project is off the rails? And so that has more to do with the statutory authority of the position, and that remains unchanged under the reorg proposal.
Two other questions I wanted to ask. One was, when we did the reorg and your department was created as an agency, and one of the things we had a fair amount of discussion about was the position of the other departments and their IT staff, whether or not they belong with you or they should be retained in their own departments. And ultimately, I think the proposal was to retain them in their departments, so we approved that and sent it on. How has that worked?
I think for the most part it's worked very well, and it goes back to my point earlier. Government relies on technology in order to be able to function, so you have to have a workforce within your agency. Some of the smaller agencies do get challenged, as you heard earlier, to try and maintain a workforce that's capable to support their technology. That's why we have the services side of our agency. But for the most part, departments really do need technology staff on site and in their offices in order to maintain and manage their technology, whether it's the applications that serve large programs or process large workloads, or simple productivity tools like their desktop computers. So I think it's important to have that within departments.
So that's worked satisfactorily from your perspective?
Yeah, I think it has. And I think the fact, if you ask most departments, they'll tell you that they greatly rely on their technology staff. It's not to say there isn't room for improvement or room for efficiencies there either. To that end, our department establishes standards. We've recently launched an effort to establish an Office of Professional Development whose whole focus is making sure that the state's technology workforce is skilled and capable. So that's going to reach out into all the different departments to make sure that they're all up to snuff.
And my final question is really not on the reorg, but I couldn't pass up the opportunity to ask you what your reaction was to the collapse of the courts IT project.
I was really disappointed. I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned there. One of the key lessons, which I'll go ahead and put in a plug in now, is that should have been under the jurisdiction of the state CIO.
6 months ago. Maybe.
But having said that, there's a lot to be learned. I think the tragic part of it is that I think in my mind it's an example of had they done the right level of planning and and preparation for the project, they probably would have a successful rollout. The system they developed, as best as I could tell, and their own independent experts that were hired, seems to work. They just didn't have a really good plan for how they were going to roll it out. So,
do you think that hurts the ability in some of the big projects that you're managing, the confidence level in those projects, either among the public or in the legislature or in the administration?
I think definitely anytime a public sector project goes off the rails, it hurts everybody. From a perception perspective, from the reputation that there goes government, they can't do technology. But it also provides some very valuable lessons, which we have learned. We did try and engage with the administrative office of the courts to offer guidance and assistance, and then also to glean lessons learned from there so that we can apply them on our big projects, which we are doing. So I think as a state CIO, yes, it does disappoint me, and I think it does hurt our overall reputation as a state. But I think there's also some very valuable lessons that we could take from there and apply them in the rest of the portfolio. We offered our help, and then they accepted it. They tried to accept it. The point at which we were able to engage, the train was pretty far down the tracks at that point. But they were open to hearing from us, and I think even today, because we met since the Judicial Council took their decision, and they're quite open to any advice or help that we can offer them.
Any other questions from the commissioners?
Okay, thank you.
Secretary, soon to be Director Ramos.
The next speaker is Carol Hinton, Vice President for State and Local Government for TechAmerica. TechAmerica is the IT industry's largest national advocacy organization, disseminating research and organizing conferences and seminars to explore issues with government and industry representatives. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm pleased to be here and have this opportunity to testify in front of you all today. Thank you, Stuart, for introducing TechAmerica. Just one additional thing I might add. Well, 2 points. One is that the name is a little bit new. We've only been around for 3 years in this name. We are the result of a merger of the American Electronics Association, AEA, which has been around for 50 or 60 years, as well as the Information Technology Association of America, ITAA. And one of the unique points that's relevant to this discussion this afternoon is that we have as our member companies almost every single company that does business with the state of California or state and local government, the federal government, is a member of TechAmerica. I want to start by saying that TechAmerica applauds the plans of the governor to reorganize and simplify and streamline state government. We think that this is both unnecessary, but it is both necessary and overdue. That said, we are concerned about one aspect of the proposal, which has to do with the restructuring of the California Technology Agency into a department within the new Government Operations Agency. We believe that this move will lead to negative and unintended consequences. It will be more siloing of IT, not less, more inefficiency and cost, not less, and more bureaucracy and red tape, not less. We think that in this modern, technologically driven world, what's needed is a strong cabinet-level agency led by a visionary CIO, someone who can have the full statutory authority to cut through the red tape, pull in other senior officials, develop and implement a strategic vision for IT for the state. And in fact, there are 24 other states that have a state CIO at the cabinet level. And those states include New York, North Carolina, Illinois, and Colorado. And that, of course, is the model that was envisioned by the law that created the technology agency and California's CIO. And we believe there is just no rationale for abandoning that model at this point. My remarks today are going to cover three areas. One, the value of technology to the state of California and its impact on economic development, the impact that it has around the state, and finally, and most importantly, this whole concept of e-government. So turning first to the value of technology, at TechAmerica, we certainly understand the desire to simplify state government. But the fact is that the world we live in today is far different than the one that existed 35 years ago. And just to give you some context, the tech industry was in its infancy 35 years ago. Apple wasn't incorporated until 1977. Cisco had not been founded until 1984. Microsoft didn't go public until 1986. So today, technology has moved out of the garage and into labs and R&D facilities. It has become an economic engine like none other. California is leading the way in virtually every category. California is the #1 cyber state. Close to 1 million men and women up and down the state work for the technology industry, or in technology fields, I should be more precise. Of the 30 largest publicly traded companies headquartered here, 14 by my count are technology companies. And that doesn't even consider the new generation of companies that are rising, such as Facebook, Twitter, Cigna. There are hundreds of startups up and down the state of California that are hoping to make it big. Secondly, I just want to touch on how technology is leading to the economic recovery. There's many examples of this. In the past 4 years, the app economy in California has created 110,000 new jobs. In 2010, it is thought that technology firms employ 78 of every 1,000 private sector workers. Technology workers earn on average $110,000 plus dollars a year. And California's 42,000 technology establishments have a payroll of nearly $1.3 billion. Survey after survey indicates that tech is hiring and that this is fueling job growth and economic recovery for the state. Thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, I want to just touch on, beyond the broader job and economic impacts, I want to touch on why technology has the power to make government more responsive and less expensive. TechAmerica issued a report in the late 2010 that was discussing this very subject. We pointed to a number of ways that e-government can lead to more efficiency. We cited examples of transforming programs and services through IT-enabled innovation and improvement, consolidating IT infrastructure and applying asset-optimizing tools, applying new delivery models and technologies to drive savings, enable innovation, and promote economic development. I want to just read one quote from you from the report. The report concludes by saying, state and local governments can no longer operate with multiple, often redundant technology capabilities dispersed throughout the organization. Whether the choice is to do internal optimization, consolidation, or to look to private sector solutions such as managed services, cloud computing, or software as a service, the time is now to take on the growing complexity of delivering high-quality solutions at reduced costs. We cited many examples in the report. One had to do with how electronic payment card systems in both Oklahoma and Michigan are saving their states millions by eliminating paper checks for a number of programs. There was another example about how Ohio has implemented a best-in-class shared services, resulting in both the state as well as local agencies centralizing key business processes. A third example explained how Michigan addressed its severe budget challenge by implementing consolidation, virtualization solutions, resulting in improved services and cut costs. My point is this: it is imperative and very important that we have a broad enterprise approach to technology. The business of running the state of California, it couldn't be more true today than ever. That while we can speak about efficiencies of putting 3 departments together that have something to do with each other, until we have a full vision and a full enterprise approach to running the state, we will not maximize the goals of cost savings. My bottom line is that implementing complex IT projects and programs require collaboration, coordination, and vision. California needs its state CIO to be able to look across the state's entire IT landscape, develop a strategic plan, and find the resources and marshal the political capital to go forward. The state CIO needs a seat at the table as a cabinet secretary. And finally, California, as I've indicated, is the home to the technology industry. So we at TechAmerica believe the state should be supporting technology, leading by example. Unfortunately, we see this proposal as a step backwards. We believe that California ought to continue to benefit from a fully constituted cabinet-level technology agency. Thank you.
Warren K.
Thank you. You've made a very good case for the role of technology in our economy and the importance of it to state government. But getting to the sort of the nut of your testimony, the proposal in effect is to put the technology agency into another agency and remove the CIO from the cabinet. The CIO is still the state CIO. The CIO still has all of the statutory roles and responsibilities and leverage at his disposal. The departments still have to follow the rules that are promulgated, and I'm having trouble understanding, well, let me put it this form of a question. Do you think that by virtue of being on the cabinet, the CIO can be more influential with other members of the administration?
We do. We really do believe that stature matters, and that's why 24 states have structured their government to have the state CIO reporting to the governor.
Are the other 26 states not as effective?
Well, that's a subjective question, of course. But
well, that's kind of relevant, though.
It is very relevant. You know, this technology agency has only been around a very short time. We just don't think it has had its opportunity to prove whether or not it is well constituted and well organized as it is. We don't see there's any compelling reason to make a change to it. It's not clear that there will be cost savings realized by making this organizational change. And yes, we do strongly believe that for the state of California to be looked at around the nation and other places, it's just not appropriate to demote, if you will, the technology agency down to a mere department.
Okay, so you're saying one, perception matters, and number two, you believe, although we haven't enough experience to really know this, or maybe somebody does know, that being a member of the cabinet provides more leverage.
Well, I think you can point to different situations where the structure as it exists today doesn't even empower the state CIO to have leverage over all IT projects. It was only recently that the state CIO has a voice over a renewal of a Medi-Cal contract. Carlos just mentioned earlier, the courts system that went awry was not something of which he was had any authority over.
The plan is agnostic on that. I mean, the plan has, will give you more or less authority over Medi-Cal reports.
Well, I will only say that we think stature matters, and we think that the cabinet seat is an important thing. We are pleased that the governor's office has recognized the need to maintain statutory authority of the role and the title of state CIO. We just would like to see it remain as a technology agency.
Thank
you. Yes, sir, Commissioner Flanagan.
Do you want me to do the sans microphone?
No, we're not going to do the microphone.
Because we're technologically.
That way we can get you on tape.
I must tell you, I guess I shouldn't say this, but I agree with you.
Thank you.
It's just because of the nature of California and how everybody's gone impacted by it. I guess the question for you is, looking at it from your perspective, do all government agencies have the same difficulty implementing large technology projects? It seems like here in California, every couple of years, somebody has this huge train wreck. Is that because of the private sector consultants you're bringing in, or is it the yeah? So, well, somebody came in and said they had 500 consultants in one of their agencies. They were technology consultants. Why does the government such have a hard time doing this? Or are there some governments in some states that, frankly, haven't excelled at it?
Well, let's face it, California is a very big place, and just like the federal government, technology, implementing large, complex IT projects is often a very challenging endeavor. So I can't...
Well, I guess, but the private sector, big companies somehow do it. They bring in consultants and they get it done. What's so unique about the governmental process that makes it so difficult?
I think if you examine and pull back the onion on any in any specific IT project that went awry in the public sector, you will always find there was blame on both sides. So I don't know that it's unique for state government or public sector implementations. I don't know that I'm qualified to comment on that.
You can have the exact same problem in the private sector also. It's just you're trying to integrate a lot of different systems. No matter who's doing it, it just becomes tough.
Well, you have conflicting interests of management and authority and legislative oversight and labor unions and perhaps people wanting to maintain the status quo. I mean, it's just complicated.
So the answer is there is no answer.
Thank you.
Just as sort of a point aside, I mean, we had testimony here a few years ago. We were looking at Medicaid and Medi-Cal from Kaiser, who's now renowned in the medical industry because they've probably got the most advanced data system to track patient information and patient records and patient prescriptions and all the different things that go along with medical record keeping, which is clearly the way of the future. It took them 10 years to do that project. And, well, it took them 8 at the time, and they had 2 more years to go, and they testified and promised to get it done. So that gives you magnitude of what it takes to do some of these kind of projects. And you take something like Fiscal right now, I mean, trying to integrate all financial systems of the state of California, which are literally all over the place into a unified system, is a massive undertaking, which I hope is successful.
Absolutely.
Better be successful. Other questions for Ms. Henn? Carlos, you want to respond to what she had to say? Or you don't have to. You already said what you had to say.
Well, actually, I'd like to respond to Mr. Flanagan.
Okay. Be my guest.
I wasn't blaming on you.
That's what I was going to say. It wasn't my fault. Thank you. No, actually, Mr. Flanagan, in response to your question, 2 things I wanted to say. One is, from my perspective, we actually in the state don't have any worse track record than anybody else. We just get a lot more publicity when our systems go off the rails. In fact, very few of them, of the large number of projects that we actually do have, fail. True, some of them go over budget, some of them don't come in, per the schedule. But that's because of the way that we do our planning and projection of budgets. We basically ask departments to project what it's going to cost and how long it's going to take, sometimes years before they actually are able to go out to procurement and actually sign a contract and then roll it out. What happens in government is we just have a lot more transparency. So if the question is, what's different between the private sector and government, is that we have a lot more transparency. So you see everything that happens on, in our projects. The private sector actually has a pretty high rate of unsuccessful or attempts as well. They just call it research and development. We don't get to call it that, and you don't get to see it often. But it's with any complex endeavor, you do have big challenges. Having said that, though, there are certain challenges to technology projects in government. One is, as Carol pointed out, you have multiple masters. It's not usually a single, CEO that gets to make all the decisions around the technology projects. How you fund them, what sort of a schedule, how you tell your staff you're going to implement this or else. So we have multiple masters. We have multiple entities that get involved. Like I said, our agency does the oversight. We have to approve the proposals. The Department of General Services has to approve and sometimes run the procurements. They have to sign the contracts. And then, the legislature and Department of Finance get involved with it as well. All those complexities do add time. They do adding time and risk to a project. And, the length of time it takes us to run through and put a project in place. Things change, program operations change, statute changes, requirements change. So all of that adds risk and complexity. But overall, we actually don't have that bad of a track record.
Thank you.
Sure.
If I could add just one thing, I know that this governor believes that his organizational structure is very flat and he's not too concerned about where the boxes line up. But I think what's important for you as the Little Hoover Commission is this plan is not being proposed just for the duration of this governor's term. Presumably it will live on when there could be a much more hierarchical approach to government by the next governor. And I think it's important that we look at it with a longer view.
So maybe this is a backdoor way of making a plug for the notion of government operations agency. Secretary Ramos' predecessor, Ms. Takai, when she came before us, said she would like, in an ideal world, to have more control, if not the control over procurement. It was a big issue because it really slowed things down. And to Commissioner Flanagan's point, I think the stories that one hears about California have as much to do with the incredible challenges for outside contractors and those within, and the stakeholders, figure out what they want. You need proposals to figure out what you want, and then you need those to be reviewed by general services, on and on. So the real bottlenecks come in the paperwork that's been created. And so I hope, to your point, Ms. Hendon, that if we have something called a government operations agency, they're going to be able to cut through a lot of this. I personally would like to see Secretary Ramos, whether it's Secretary Director or whatever, have the ability to cut through, to take more control over procurement. That's going to mean a heck of a lot more. So the right question that you ought to be asking is, will this organization, and this administration and one's for it, going to make it easier through consolidation of operations to streamline this process? Because that's where a huge problem is. And I would love to hear the folks from the administration tell me that it's going to happen. Who wants to go first?
Yeah.
I am all for cutting red tape. I think if you see what we've been doing within the agency, just in my term, we've gone back and looked at all of our processes, not just what we do in the area of procurement, because we do have procurement policy within my shop, but all of the policies. And now we're looking at our project approvals and saying, okay, let's look at that process and see, one, is it as effective or as efficient as it can be, which it obviously is not. So we're looking to shorten the life cycle. We're looking to get rid of unnecessary redundancy and duplication and throwing out processes that really don't add value or protect the state. We have been working with the Department of General Services to do that. I will tell you, in my opinion, it's going to be easier to do that when we're all in the same agency. But I know that the director and chief deputy also share that commitment to try and make things make more sense and just be shorter, less bureaucratic, and really add value. I'll just stay up there.
Thank you. I think we have one more witness on this particular topic, Stuart.
John Thomas Flynn, principal with Flynn, Cossack & Associates. Mr. Flynn is co-founder and partner of the firm is the strategic marketing, business development, education and training, and executive staffing organization to serve public sector IT vendor community. Mr. Flynn was the California's first chief information officer appointed by Governor Wilson in 1995.
Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
For coming.
Glad to be back. Wish it was under different circumstances, unfortunately. I'll try not to be redundant. I know it's been a long afternoon. You got still a ways to go.
That's okay.
I want to say hello to everybody. I see some new faces, but a lot of folks I'm used to working with. The old administration, Lauren, of course, Jack. Virginia, it's always nice to see you. I echo Carol's words, and certainly I urge this commission, given its decisive and emphatic support for empowering this agency over the last, it's got to be more than a decade now. I suggest strongly you do not reverse yourself. This is a crucial juncture, and this may be the last gasp. And as Carol mentioned, this could be a decision that goes on for another decade if it happens. The technology agency in the state of California, as empowered with the strong support of this commission, was the envy of the entire public sector IT community in the United States. And I say that as a former president of the National Association of State CIOs, as a CIO in Massachusetts, and the first state CIO here in California. I've been on the U.S. Government Accountability Office's IT Advisory Board for 14 years. They, of course, sponsored or oversee the Klinger-Cohen legislation, which created the CIO's office in the federal government. And the best practices is a very strong secretary appointed, and each cabinet secretary has an assistant secretary or higher that is the chief information officer. So this would be a major step back. And I just want to say, mentioning of Terry Takai would not have been appointed by President Obama to be the CIO for the Department of Defense if she was overseeing some administrative services agency in an operations bureaucracy. I'm not going to get into some of my more flowery comments in my testimony over the weekend. Suffice it to say that I thought the governor's IT literacy challenge prose was an indication that this proposal was not well thought out. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I agree with 99% of what was in the governor's reorganization plan. I'm not a consolidation guy myself from way back. But this is the wrong one. This is really the wrong one. And putting it in with all these other little departments, you know, 30 million here, 40 million here, and maybe DGS at 700 million. Carlos has to oversee an agency that spends $3 or $4 billion a year and an IT portfolio of another 6 or 7. That's $10 billion. That's 1/10 of the budget of the state. That's bigger than corrections, bigger than higher ed. This is not small potatoes. And it's not just keeping the trains running. It's not just running a data center. When Bill Gates retired as CEO and president of Microsoft, you know what a job he took? He became CIO and chief technology officer of Microsoft. This is critically important to the way government's going to function. Yeah, it's going to stumble. There's huge projects, but this agency was finally empowered to get things done. And if you take a step back, you're taking a step back, it's going to end up costing money. It's going to cost money. And I'll tell you why. You brought up courts. Brought up, we got CalPERS, $500 million modernization program that's been having problems. Look at the controller's 21st century project. Virginia, they've been trying to build that payroll system for 12 years when I was CIO. And it's still not done. They call it the 21st century project. I renamed it the 22nd century project the way it's going. These are serious problems. It's not a time to downgrade this agency's responsibility. It's time to give them more responsibility. It's the state CIO. There should be no spending in state government from an IT basis that's not under the jurisdiction of the state CIO. So you drop them down into a big bureaucracy, and I'm telling you, I'm the only one here, the only one in this room, maybe in Sacramento, that took a job as state CIO that wasn't a cabinet position. All right? There's a long story before that, because when I interviewed for the job, they told me it was cabinet level. And when I got to Sacramento after I sold my house in Boston, et cetera, I was told I was not a member of the cabinet. And that was a big deal. That means you didn't go to cabinet meetings. And when you got in an argument with somebody at a department level, they were your peer, they could go right up the chain to the cabinet. And you're constantly, so everything Carlos has to do now is becoming infinitely more difficult. He says it, he has the same duties, the same responsibilities. He's lost his authority. And I don't care what anybody says, that's the way it is. I'll just close by saying that, you know, this explanation about still being able to do the same thing, I just don't buy it. The governor in his State of the State speech, State of the State back in January, he hadn't taken his first breath when he stopped dropping the names of the big Silicon Valley giants, Hewlett-Packard, Oracle, Qualcomm, et cetera, et cetera. Ask any one of those CEOs of those companies whether the CIO has a seat at the table on the executive council. I mean, that's a no-brainer. This is bad idea, bad policy, and it will have implications on the budget. It has implications on the morale. And I'll tell you my opinion, and this is a personal one. This is the beginning of defunding of information technology in the state of California. You're going to see that there's 6,000 IT state workers, and there's probably twice that number of IT vendors. And you're going to see a huge cut. I've already seen it. Fiscal, the state's financial system, the new financial system, which I advocated when I was CIO. They just awarded the contract to Accenture for $200 million. $200 million? There's no way they can do that project for $200 million. They'll be lucky to get a third of it done for $200 million. Look at the payroll project is twice that now, and it's not done yet. So I'm just saying, I'm getting a little fired up here, a little too much caffeine, I guess, but I take this personally, Jack. I really do. We fought, and you guys fought so long and hard to make this happen. And I know I've been in the position Carlos is in, and I know it's very difficult, very difficult. You gotta be part of the team, but man, this is an opportunity lost, and it'll take a half a generation to change it. All right, I've said my piece. I really have a few more points here, but I'm not going to make them. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to cover them.
Sure you don't want to make them?
Well, you know, everybody's getting a little tired, so I had fired up a little bit. Well, I was looking for some kind of an analogy. It's like, like I have George Washington and John Adams and Jefferson, and all of a sudden, Jefferson calls back the founding fathers in and says, hey, go back, Declaration of Independence, go back and rewrite that thing. We'll be part of the Commonwealth of Great Britain again. This is crazy, just an absolute crazy proposition. And I see Governor, God bless him, used to be governor, California would have satellites, started off with a 1-800 number for donations for a campaign. That was forward thinking. And now we got confiscation of mobile phones. What's with that? In an era of mobility, we're confiscating smartphones? That just doesn't make sense. Everybody else is getting rid of landlines, and we're getting rid of cell phones. It got national news everywhere, but it was a laughingstock of the IT community. This just doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense at all. And you speak of transparency. Governor closed down transparency website. What kind of sense does that make? It just drives me crazy. But anyway, out of personal stake in it, like I said, I had to come in here when I was a director of Department of Information and Technology. Every decision, every project approval, every project disapproval, every great new idea by any cabinet secretary that wanted to spend some money on something, thought, let's do a sole source on this. I had to fight and fight and fight because I wasn't at a seat at the table. So I guess, otherwise I love the proposal.
It's good to see that you've mellowed.
We're all a little grayer, but we still have, fire somewhere.
Commissioner Quinn has a question, but he has to wait to get the microphone before he...
Okay.
This room could use some technology upgrades.
Not to mention an air conditioner. Carla's the only smart one.
A little hot in the room, it's even more so.
Why'd they stick you in this dump anyway? What kind of indication is that about this august body?
I think I have more of a comment. I was there when Governor Brown was grappling a year ago with the cell phone issue, more than a year ago. And it wasn't anti-technology, by the way. There were cell phones, I think, as many cell phones as there were, 1/3 as many cell phones as there was employees in the state. So that meant that, assuming that every executive had a cell phone, you had others left over for custodians, for gardeners, and so on. And I think it was an effort not to turn the clock on technology, but to look at this and say, hey, who should get a cell phone paid for by taxpayers? And I doubt if at Intel or Apple or the different companies you mentioned, if they provide company-paid cell phones to every employee there. I think that's not the way it goes. This is an effort.
Are you saying, Commissioner, that this was your idea?
No. Although I think it was a very good idea.
Okay.
I think Whether this reorganization is the only way to do it or not, I'm not saying. Obviously, there are many, many ways you can restructure government. I think clearly this was the effort by a forward-looking governor to come up with a plan that he believed would make things work more efficiently.
Downgrading your technology agency and downgrading your California Emergency Management Agency?
It's nice to use the word
Please.
downgrading. This is not a downgrading. It's an effort to make things work more efficiently within the sphere of government.
Have you been a cabinet member in a government agency?
Yes.
Where?
Here in California.
As with
Governor Brown the first
okay,
time.
okay.
And I will tell you, and I just learned from Commissioner Kay, it was the same thing when he was in state service. We rarely met as a cabinet. Having a seat at that table provides very little magic. In my case, none. Maybe perhaps a bit more in yours. That isn't what makes the world go around. What makes the world go around here in Sacramento, I found, was having good ideas, working with people, listening, being open to new concepts, and being willing to work with your colleagues. And it isn't really the title, it's not the position at the cabinet table. And I think this clearly was an effort on Governor Brown's part to make things work better. And I'm not going to say here that I know for a fact it will. I have really no idea. But I'm listening to people involved in it, and I'm listening to you. All of you seem sincere and well-intentioned. All I'm saying is that the governor made a call here. I hope it's the right call, and I think that there's certainly no evidence in the world that this is a downgrading. I just don't buy that. So it wasn't a question. But
we respectfully disagree, but I appreciate it. It'd been interesting if your agency had been downgraded when you were a cabinet secretary. Maybe you'd have a different perspective, because it's tough. I know Lauren and I served together in the Wilson administration. I think you were deputy secretary, right? Deputy secretary? Yeah. It was a lot of protocol going on in those days, I want to tell you. Any other questions?
Thank you for your testimony.
Okay, welcome.
Really appreciate it.
My
Good to hear
pleasure.
that point of view. Okay, so I think that concludes. Do I have any speaker cards on this? I don't think I do. So we're scheduled to take a 15-minute break.